Okay, so when we're looking at the EZ bar upright row variation, and essentially when we're looking at every single exercise that we're trying to execute, we're looking at perfecting the intent and standardization. In terms of when we're looking at the intent is always, are we stimulating that primary muscle that we're trying to target relative to that given exercise? So with this variation, we're predominantly looking at stimulating the medial delts, so the side delts, for lack of better terms. There are going to be some other encompassing muscles that are going to be stimulated as well, because they have to kind of play their role to help support the primary muscle, So those muscles are going to be like the traps, anterior delt, and to a small degree the posterior delts as well. So you're going to feel some kind of stimulation to those muscles, but predominantly we want to be making sure that we are stimulating the medial delts. So that's the intent. And then second of all, it's the standardization of that set in terms of execution, tempo, ranges of motion, and our mechanics, aka the form and setup. From start to finish of every single set, we need to make sure that everything is remaining uniform and identical. So whenever we see some kind of diminish in any one of those aspects that I just mentioned, then essentially that entire set has changed. The stimulus has been moved from that targeted muscle to something else, because essentially our nervous system or our mechanics is just saying, I cannot do this anymore, I'm getting weaker, so I need some additional support. And that's where our body will shift our mechanics, our position, our form, our posture, to try and make that set easier. Now that is not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to, like I said, standardize the set and make sure that that primary muscle is being stimulated from start to finish as efficiently as possible. So with the upright row, I'm going to show you how it would look in terms of the intent and standardization. The key things that you need to look out for is watch my range of motion from start to end. So in terms of where the bar begins, where it comes to, and then when it finishes, from start to end, look at my body in terms of its position, movement, inertial effects and momentum. If you see any kind of changes to anything I just mentioned, then that means that I am seeing diminishments in that standardization. So have a watch, I'm going to execute now. Oh. So, I don't know if you guys just saw there, but that very last repetition, the bar finished relatively shorter than what it was finishing in the previous repetitions, if that makes sense. So, rep 1 to rep 12 or rep 13, the bar was finishing parallel with my nose. That very last repetition, the bar pretty much finished parallel with my chin. So that was a change in the range of motion. So that is a first indication that something is starting to break down, or the primary muscles are beginning to fatigue. So in that moment, I stop, because standardization has started to diminish. So that is what you need to imply with every single exercise. The intent from start to finish, making sure that you can feel that targeted muscle being stimulated as efficiently as possible. And when it comes to the standardization, you're making sure everything remains uniform and identical to the previous repetition that you've just done. As soon as anything starts to change or diminish, then that set is done. You take a note of it, and then you go forward, and then you try and progress that set, whether that's increase that range of motion, so from the chin to the nose, that will be a progression, or if the load was too light, You can go up in load, and then that will be a progression. Or if you haven't hit your rep range, you can try and stick to the same load and get more repetitions, again making sure that everything else remains standardized.